Marcus Chen stepped off the transport ship onto Station Kepler 7, his boots clanking against the metal grating. The space station buzzed with activity as beings from dozens of different worlds moved through the corridors. Tall, blue-skinned Zentari merchants haggled with squat, rock-like Gorlons. Ethereal Valons floated past, their translucent bodies shimmering in the artificial light. As the newest human representative to the Galactic Trade Consortium, Marcus felt the weight of responsibility on his shoulders. Humanity had only been part of the galactic community for 5 years, ever since the Zentari had made first contact. Most species still viewed humans as newcomers, barely worth notice. Marcus made his way through the crowded corridors toward the diplomatic quarter. His assignment was simple: negotiate trade agreements for Earth's agricultural products. Humans had discovered that many alien species craved the unique flavors of Earth-grown foods, something about the planet's diverse biosphere that couldn't be replicated elsewhere. The diplomatic quarter was quieter, with polished walls displaying holographic art from various worlds. Marcus found his assigned office and was reviewing his files when a soft chime indicated someone was at his door. "Come in," he called, not looking up from his tablet. The door slid open with a whisper, and Marcus heard the soft sound of footsteps. Still focused on his work, he spoke without raising his head. "If you're here about the grain contracts, I'll need to see the shipping manifests first." Silence. Marcus looked up and felt his breath catch in his throat. Standing before him was the most beautiful being he had ever seen. She appeared humanoid but was clearly not human. Her skin had a subtle silver luminescence, and her eyes were deep violet, like twin galaxies spinning in the darkness of space. Long platinum hair fell in waves past her shoulders. She wore a simple but elegant dress that seemed to shift colors as she moved. But what struck Marcus most was her expression. She was looking at him with an intensity that made his heart race, as if she could see straight through to his soul. Her violet eyes held something he couldn't identify. Recognition? Sadness? Hope? "I'm sorry," Marcus said, standing quickly and smoothing his uniform. "I wasn't expecting anyone. I'm Marcus Chen, Earth's trade representative." The alien woman took a step closer, her movements fluid like water. When she spoke, her voice was melodic, with an accent Marcus couldn't place. "Look into my eyes and remember, human. We've met before." Marcus stared into those mesmerizing violet depths and felt a strange sensation, like déjà vu but stronger. There was something familiar about her, but he was certain they had never met. He would have remembered someone like her. "I think you have me confused with someone else," Marcus said gently. "I'm new to the station. This is my first assignment off Earth." The woman's expression softened, and she tilted her head slightly. "Perhaps you do not remember yet. My name is Lyria Starweaver. I am what your people would call a temporal guardian." Temporal guardian? Marcus had never heard the term before. "My people exist across multiple timelines simultaneously. We can see the threads of fate as they weave through time and space." Lyria moved closer, and Marcus caught a scent like starlight and ozone. "In another timeline, another time, you and I fought side by side against the darkness that threatened to consume the galaxy." Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. That's impossible. Humans have only been in space for a few decades. We've never fought in any galactic conflicts. Lyria's lips curved in a sad smile. "Not in this timeline, no. But time is not the straight line your scientists believe it to be. It branches and curves, creating infinite possibilities. In the timeline where we met, humanity had reached the stars much earlier." She paused, studying his face intently. "You were different then, yet the same. The courage in your heart, the determination in your eyes, these things transcend time itself." Marcus found himself drawn to her words, even though they made no logical sense. "What happened in this other timeline?" The Devourers came, Lyria said, her voice growing heavy with memory. Ancient machines from the void between galaxies, consuming everything in their path. Planets, stars, entire civilizations, nothing could stop them. The greatest empires of the galaxy fell in days. She walked to the window that showed the vast expanse of space beyond the station. Stars twinkled like diamonds against the black canvas of eternity. Every species tried to fight them, she continued. The mighty Zentari with their energy weapons, the wise ethereals with their psychic powers, even my own people with our mastery over time itself. We all failed. But humans? Marcus found himself asking, though he wasn't sure why. Lyria turned back to him, and there was something like admiration in her violet eyes. Humans were the key. You see, the Devourers were machines programmed to adapt to any form of attack. Every weapon used against them, they learned to counter. Every strategy employed, they overcame. She walked back toward him, her gaze never leaving his face. But humans were unpredictable. Your species has this wonderful, chaotic creativity that even the most advanced computers cannot fully understand or replicate. You think in ways that break patterns, solve problems in ways that should not work, but somehow do. Marcus felt a strange stirring in his chest, as if something long buried was trying to surface. You're saying humans defeated these Devourers? Not defeated, Lyria corrected. But you found a way to stop them, to send them back to the void from which they came. And you, the you from that timeline, you were the one who figured out how to do it. The room fell silent except for the distant hum of the station's life support systems. Marcus found himself staring into Lyria's eyes again, and for a moment, he could have sworn he saw flashes of another life. Fire in the darkness, ships exploding like dying stars, and through it all, a desperate race against time to save not just humanity, but all life in the galaxy. Why are you telling me this? Marcus asked quietly. Lyria's expression grew urgent. Because the Devourers are coming again. My people have seen the signs across multiple timelines. And in this timeline, humanity is not ready. You have not yet learned to reach beyond your single world, to think on a galactic scale. But if what you're saying is true, if I was able to stop them before... The potential is within you, Lyria said, reaching out to touch his hand. Her skin was warm despite its metallic sheen. But potential is not guarantee. In some timelines, we succeed. In others... She didn't finish the sentence. Marcus felt the weight of her words settling on him like a heavy cloak. How long do we have? Time moves differently between dimensions, but I estimate perhaps 2 of your Earth years before they breach the barrier between galaxies. 2 years to prepare for something that had apparently defeated the greatest civilizations in the galaxy. Marcus ran a hand through his hair, feeling overwhelmed. There is hope, Lyria said softly. The consortium has agreed to share certain technologies with humanity, technologies that could accelerate your development. And there are others, beings from various worlds who remember the old stories of the Devourers. They can be convinced to help, if the right person asks. And you think I'm that person? Lyria smiled, and for the first time since she had entered his office, it reached her eyes. I know you are. In every timeline where we succeed, you are the one who unites the species of the galaxy. You have a gift for seeing past differences, for finding common ground where others see only division. Marcus looked out at the diverse crowd moving through the station corridors. Zentari, Gorlons, Velans, and dozens of other species, all going about their daily business, unaware of the threat approaching from beyond the stars. What do you need from me? He asked finally. First, you must remember, Lyria said. The knowledge is locked away in your mind, in the quantum echoes that connect all versions of yourself across timelines. I can help you access those memories, but it will not be easy. She moved closer, and Marcus could feel the energy radiating from her like heat from a star. The process is intense. It involves temporarily merging your consciousness with that of your alternate self. You will experience all of his memories, all of his pain and triumph, as if they were your own. Will I still be me? You will be you, but more complete. Like finding a missing piece of your soul that you never knew was gone. Marcus thought about his quiet life on Earth. His simple assignment to negotiate trade agreements. Part of him wanted to refuse, to go back to his normal existence and pretend this conversation had never happened. But as he looked into Lyria's eyes, he felt that strange stirring again. Deep in his mind, like an echo across eternity, he heard a voice that sounded like his own shouting orders as stars died around him. He saw hands that looked like his hands working frantically at alien controls while the fate of a galaxy hung in the balance. "When do we start?" he asked. Lyria's relief was palpable. "Now if you are willing. But first you should know, the you from the other timeline, he cared for me deeply. And I for him. Those feelings may return with the memories." Marcus studied her beautiful alien features and tried to imagine loving this being from beyond the stars. It wasn't difficult to imagine at all. "I understand," he said simply. Lyria nodded and moved to the center of the room. She raised her hands, and the air around her began to shimmer like heat waves. Patterns of light danced across her silver skin, and her violet eyes began to glow. "Take my hands," she said, extending them toward him, "and prepare to remember who you really are." Marcus reached out and grasped her hands. The moment their skin touched, the universe exploded into light and memory. He felt himself falling through time and space, through possibilities and might-have-beens, toward a destiny he had never known was waiting for him. The last thing he heard before consciousness fled was Lyria's voice, calling across the dimensions. "Welcome back, my love." Marcus found himself standing on the bridge of a massive starship. But it wasn't quite him. The memories flooded through his consciousness like a dam bursting, and suddenly he was two people at once: the trade negotiator from Earth and Commander Marcus Chen of the Human Defense Fleet. The timeline he now remembered was different from his own. In this reality, humanity had discovered faster-than-light travel 3 centuries earlier through a chance encounter with an ancient alien artifact. By the time the Devourers arrived, humans had spread across hundreds of star systems and become one of the major powers in the galaxy. Through the memory, Marcus watched himself, this other version, as he stood before a holographic display showing the current battle. Red dots representing Devourer ships advanced like a plague across the galaxy, consuming everything in their path. Green dots showing Allied forces winked out one by one. "Admiral Chen," came a familiar voice. Marcus turned to see Lyria approaching, but she looked different here. Her silver skin bore scars, and her violet eyes held the weariness of someone who had seen too much death. She wore the uniform of the Temporal Guardians, decorated with ribbons representing battles fought across multiple timelines. "The Zentari 7th Fleet has fallen," she reported, her voice tight with controlled emotion. "The ethereal mine ship Transcendence was destroyed attempting to psychically assault the lead Devourer vessel. They adapted to the mental attacks within minutes." The Marcus in the memory ran his hand through graying hair. "How many civilians did we evacuate from the Rigel system?" 12 million. The Devourers consumed the rest before our ships could reach them." 12 million, saved out of a population of 8 billion. Marcus felt sick, even knowing these were another man's memories. Around the bridge, officers from a dozen different species worked frantically at their stations. A Zentari weapons officer coordinated with a Gorlon engineer, while a floating Velan monitored communications from the fleet. "Sir," called out Lieutenant Rodriguez, one of the human tactical officers. Long-range sensors are picking up movement in the Vega sector. Looks like a probe swarm, at least 1,000 strong. Marcus studied the tactical display, watching as the probe swarm moved with mechanical precision toward the next inhabited system. They're scouting for the main force. How long until they reach Kepler Station? 6 hours at current speed, Rodriguez replied. 6 hours to evacuate another billion souls, if they were lucky. The Devourers didn't discriminate. Organic life, artificial intelligence, even digital consciousness stored in quantum computers. They consumed it all, converting matter and energy into more of themselves. Admiral, Lyria said quietly, there may be another option. Marcus looked at her, seeing something he hadn't noticed before in her violet eyes. Hope or desperation? The Temporal Guardians have been analyzing the Devourer attack patterns across multiple timelines, she continued. We found something interesting. She waved her hand, and the holographic display changed to show a three-dimensional map of space-time itself. Lines of probability branched and converged like a vast web, showing different possible outcomes across multiple realities. In every timeline where we fight them conventionally, we lose, Lyria explained. They adapt too quickly, learn from every attack. But there's something unique about human tactical thinking that creates anomalies in their adaptation patterns. Anomalies? Marcus stepped closer to examine the display. Watch this. Lyria manipulated the display to show a recent battle. When the Zentari attack, they use precise, calculated strikes with maximum efficiency. The Devourers analyze the attack patterns and develop countermeasures within minutes. The display showed Zentari energy beams striking Devourer ships, which initially took damage but quickly adapted, their hull plating shifting to deflect the energy. But when humans attack, she shifted the view to show a human fleet engagement. Marcus watched as human ships used seemingly random tactics, some attacking head-on, others flanking, still others retreating only to attack from unexpected angles. Some ships even rammed Devourer vessels, while others provided covering fire. Your species doesn't follow optimal attack patterns, Lyria continued. You make decisions based on intuition, emotion, desperation, hope, things that can't be easily calculated or predicted. This creates gaps in the Devourer adaptation matrix. Marcus studied the data, his mind racing. You're saying our unpredictability is an advantage? More than that, your unpredictability might be the key to defeating them entirely. A new voice interrupted them. Admiral Chen, we're receiving a priority transmission from Earth Command. The main display shifted to show Admiral Sarah Harrison, Marcus's commanding officer and one of the most decorated humans in the fleet. Her face was grim. Marcus, I hope you're sitting down for this. Our science teams have been studying the wreckage from destroyed Devourer ships. What we've found changes everything. The display showed microscopic images of strange, crystalline structures. These are quantum processing matrices, the Devourer equivalent of a brain. But here's the interesting part. They're all networked. Every Devourer ship, every probe, every combat unit, they're all connected to a single collective intelligence. Marcus felt his blood run cold. A hive mind? Worse. A single mind controlling millions of bodies across the galaxy. That's why they adapt so quickly. Every piece of information learned by one unit is instantly shared with all the others. Lyria gasped beside him. That means we're not fighting an invasion, Admiral Harrison continued. We're fighting a single, impossibly intelligent entity that's been consuming galaxies for millions of years, and it's learning from every battle, every mistake we make. The bridge fell silent except for the hum of the ship's systems. Around them, status reports continued to come in. More fleets destroyed, more worlds consumed, more billions of lives extinguished. But Admiral, Marcus said slowly, an idea forming in his mind, if it's a single intelligence, doesn't that also make it vulnerable? What are you thinking, son? Marcus looked at Lyria, then back at the display. A hive mind is efficient, but it's also rigid. It processes information in predictable ways, makes decisions based on accumulated data. But what happens when you feed it information that doesn't make sense? Data that contradicts itself? You're talking about information warfare, Admiral Harrison said, leaning forward. More than that, I'm talking about using our unpredictability as a weapon. Marcus turned to address the bridge crew. Rodriguez, pull up every battle we've fought with the Devourers. I want to see every engagement where human tactics caused them to hesitate or adapt slower than usual. As the data flowed across the screens, patterns began to emerge. The Devourers struggled most when facing tactics that seemed illogical or self-destructive, ships that should have retreated but instead charged forward. Fleets that broke formation for no apparent reason, attacks that targeted seemingly unimportant targets while ignoring primary objectives. It's like they can't process truly irrational behavior, Marcus murmured, studying the data. Because they're machines, Lyria added, understanding dawning in her eyes. No matter how advanced, they think like computers. They analyze, calculate, predict. But humans are beautifully, chaotically illogical, Marcus finished. We make decisions based on gut feelings, desperate hope, pure stubbornness. We'll fight impossible odds just because we believe we should. He stood straighter, feeling the weight of command and the possibility of victory for the first time in months. Admiral Harrison, I need every human ship in the fleet. And I need them to do exactly the opposite of everything they've been trained to do. Marcus, what are you planning? I'm going to give the Devourer Collective the biggest headache of its artificial life. We're going to flood it with so much contradictory, illogical, impossible data that it won't be able to adapt fast enough. Over the next few hours, Marcus worked with his staff to develop the most insane battle plan in galactic history. Ships would attack their own allies. Fleets would retreat toward the enemy. Commanders would make decisions by rolling dice or flipping coins. Every principle of military strategy would be not just ignored, but actively violated. Sir, Rodriguez said hesitantly, this plan makes no sense at all. Marcus grinned for the first time in weeks. Exactly. That's the point. Lyria approached him privately as the preparations continued. Marcus, there's something I need to tell you. If this plan fails, my people have one final option. What kind of option? We can collapse this timeline entirely, preventing the Devourers from spreading to other realities. But it would mean everyone and everything in this timeline ceases to exist. She nodded, unable to meet his eyes. I wanted you to know, in case we need to make that choice. Marcus took her hands in his, feeling the warmth of her silver skin. Then we better make sure this crazy plan works. The battle began 3 hours later. Human ships emerged from hyperspace in random formations, some flying upside down, others spinning like tops. They opened fire on empty space, targeted their own shields, and flew patterns that made no tactical sense whatsoever. At first, the Devourer ships responded normally, adapting to what they perceived as standard attack patterns. But as the chaos continued, something strange began to happen. The mechanical precision of the Devourer movements started to falter. Ships paused in mid-attack, as if processing conflicting information. It's working, Lyria breathed, watching the tactical display. Look at their response times. They're slowing down. Marcus watched as human pilots did things that should have gotten them court-martialed. They flew directly at Devourer ships, then swerved away at the last second. They fired on targets behind them while flying backward. Some even played music over open comm channels while announcing their attacks in advance. The Devourer Collective, faced with thousands of simultaneous inputs that violated every logical principle it understood, began to experience something like confusion. Its adaptation routines started contradicting each other, creating cascade failures throughout the network. "Now," Marcus ordered. "All ships, maximum firepower on my mark." While the Devourers struggled to process the chaos, the human fleet struck with devastating effectiveness. Without their adaptive defenses, the alien machines were vulnerable for the first time in the war. "Admiral," came Rodriguez's excited voice, "we're detecting system failures across the entire Devourer network. It's like they're all having some kind of breakdown." Marcus watched as the seemingly invincible enemy began to retreat for the first time since the war began. The collective intelligence that had consumed galaxies was fleeing from a handful of humans who refused to behave logically. But even as victory seemed within reach, Marcus knew this was only the beginning. They had found the Devourer's weakness, but exploiting it would require something far more difficult than any battle plan. It would require humanity to stay beautifully, chaotically, impossibly human. Marcus gasped as consciousness returned, finding himself back in his office on Station Kepler 7. The memories of the other timeline burned in his mind like fire, but they were his memories now. He could remember standing on the bridge of a starship, commanding fleets in desperate battles against an enemy that consumed worlds. He could remember the weight of billions of lives depending on his decisions. Most clearly, he could remember Lyria. She was kneeling beside his chair, her violet eyes filled with concern. "Are you all right? The memory transfer was more intense than usual. Your mind fought it initially." Marcus looked at her, and suddenly she wasn't just a beautiful alien stranger. She was the woman who had stood by his side as galaxies burned, who had been willing to collapse an entire timeline to stop the Devourers. She was the person he had loved across impossible distances of space and time. "I remember," he said simply. "All of it." Relief flooded Lyria's features. "Then you know what we're facing." Marcus stood, testing his balance. The dual memories were disorienting. He was both the simple trade negotiator and the decorated admiral, both the man who had never left Earth's solar system and the one who had commanded fleets across the galaxy. "The question is," Marcus said, "how do we prepare this timeline's humanity for something they're not ready to understand?" He walked to his window, looking out at the diverse crowd of aliens moving through the station. In his other memories, many of these species had been his allies in the war against the Devourers. But in this timeline, they barely acknowledged humanity's existence. "We start small," Lyria said, joining him at the window. "There are certain individuals among the various species who retained genetic memories of the Devourer wars from their ancestors. If approached correctly, they might be convinced to help." Marcus nodded, his mind already working on the problem. "And we need to accelerate human development without making it obvious what we're doing. If we move too quickly, it'll raise questions we can't answer." Over the next several weeks, Marcus threw himself into his work with a passion that surprised everyone around him. What had seemed like simple trade negotiations became the foundation for something much larger. He convinced Earth's agricultural ministry to establish growing colonies on 12 different worlds, ostensibly to meet alien demand for human crops. In reality, he was establishing a network of human settlements that could serve as evacuation points and supply bases. Each colony was positioned near strategic hyperspace routes that would be crucial if the Devourers attacked. Marcus also began reaching out to specific individuals Lyria had identified. Dr. Vash, a Zentari physicist who had been having strange dreams about machines from the void. Commander Thok, a Gorlon military officer who collected ancient stories about the hungry dark. Meditation singer Aelin, a Velan who claimed to have prophetic visions. To each, Marcus told a different story. To Dr. Vash, he spoke of theoretical defense systems against hypothetical extragalactic threats. To Commander Thok, He shared old legends and asked for military advice. To Aelin, he simply listened as the ethereal being described visions that matched devourer attack patterns perfectly. Slowly, carefully, Marcus began to weave a network of allies without revealing the full truth. The real breakthrough came when he met with Admiral Elena Vasquez, Earth's highest-ranking military officer in the Galactic Fleet. She had arrived on Kepler-7 for a routine inspection, but Marcus saw an opportunity. "Admiral," Marcus said during their private meeting, "how quickly could Earth's military adapt to an asymmetric threat scenario?" Vasquez, a sharp-eyed woman in her 50s, studied him carefully. "That's an interesting question for a trade negotiator to ask." "I've been thinking about our position in galactic society," Marcus replied, choosing his words carefully. "We're newcomers, and that makes us vulnerable. If a threat emerged that conventional military doctrine couldn't handle, would we be able to adapt quickly enough?" "Human military thinking has always been flexible," Vasquez said. "It's one of our strengths. While other species might have more advanced technology, we excel at unconventional tactics." Marcus felt a spark of hope. Even in this timeline, humanity had retained its chaotic creativity. "What if I told you I had intelligence suggesting a potential threat to all galactic civilizations?" Marcus asked. "Something that would require unprecedented cooperation between species." Vasquez leaned forward. "I'd ask to see your intelligence briefing." That conversation led to a classified meeting with Earth's highest officials. Marcus couldn't tell them about the other timeline, but he could share his analysis of galactic vulnerabilities. He painted a picture of theoretical threats that could emerge from outside the galaxy, advanced automated systems that might view organic life as a resource to be consumed. "It sounds like science fiction," said Director Chen of Earth Intelligence. "But your strategic assessments have been remarkably accurate so far." Within months, Earth had quietly begun preparations for Contingency Omega, a theoretical defense scenario that looked remarkably like preparation for the Devourer War. New weapons were developed. Military training included scenarios involving highly adaptive enemies. Most importantly, human forces began practicing the kind of chaotic, unpredictable tactics that had proven effective in the other timeline. Marcus also worked with Lyria to establish what they called the Probability Institute, ostensibly a research facility studying quantum mechanics and temporal theory. In reality, it was a training ground for beings from various species who showed aptitude for the kind of flexible thinking needed to fight the Devourers. The most promising candidate was Dr. Sarah Kim, a human physicist who had independently theorized about the existence of collective machine intelligences. When Marcus showed her classified research data, actually memories from the other timeline, she immediately grasped the implications. "If such an entity existed," Dr. Kim said during one of their sessions, "its greatest weakness would be its reliance on logical analysis. It would struggle to process truly random or contradictory input." "Hypothetically, how would you exploit that weakness?" Marcus asked. Dr. Kim's eyes lit up with the kind of enthusiasm that made Marcus remember why he loved the human spirit. "You'd need to create a feedback loop of chaos. Multiple simultaneous inputs that contradicted each other, forcing the system to spend processing power trying to resolve impossible paradoxes." She began sketching on a holographic display. "But it couldn't be truly random. That would be too easy to filter out. It would need to be intelligently chaotic, following patterns that seem meaningful but actually lead nowhere." Marcus smiled. "Sounds like something humans would be good at." "Oh, we'd be excellent at it. Human creativity thrives on controlled chaos. Jazz musicians, abstract artists, improvisational actors. We've been training for this kind of thing for centuries without knowing it." As the months passed, the network Marcus and Lyria had built began to bear fruit. Dr. Vash developed new shield technologies based on theoretical Devourer weapon signatures. Commander Thok established joint military training exercises between human and alien forces. Aelin became a liaison between the Probability Institute and Velan psychic researchers. The breakthrough Marcus had been hoping for came 18 months after his memories had been restored. Long-range sensors detected gravitational anomalies at the edge of the galaxy, the same signatures that had heralded the Devourer arrival in the other timeline. "They're coming," Lyria said grimly as she showed Marcus the sensor data. Earlier than we expected. Marcus studied the readings, comparing them to his other memories. "No, this is good. In the original timeline, we had no warning. Here, we've had time to prepare." He activated the emergency protocols they had spent months establishing. Across the galaxy, seemingly unconnected individuals began receiving coded messages. Military units started moving into position. Research facilities shared data that would have taken years to develop in normal circumstances. To outside observers, it looked like a remarkable coincidence of scientific breakthroughs and military exercises. Only a few dozen beings across the galaxy knew they were preparing for war. The first Devourer probe entered the galaxy 3 weeks later. Marcus watched from the command center they had established in the Kepler-7 system as the probe approached the outer rim worlds. Unlike in the other timeline, they were ready. "All units, this is Admiral Chen," Marcus spoke into his communicator, using the rank that had been quietly reinstated as humanity took a larger role in galactic defense. "Operation Beautiful Chaos is now active." What followed was the strangest battle in galactic history. Human ships attacked in patterns that defied all logic. Zentari vessels flew upside down while playing classical music. Gorlan fighters performed synchronized swimming maneuvers in the vacuum of space. Velan mine ships broadcast random thoughts in 17 languages simultaneously. The Devourer probe, faced with this explosion of meaningless activity, did exactly what Marcus had hoped. It hesitated. "Sensor readings indicate the probe is experiencing processing delays," Dr. Kim reported from her position aboard the flagship. "It's trying to analyze our behavior patterns, but we're giving it too many contradictory data points." "Phase 2, Marcus ordered. "All ships, implement the humans are crazy protocol." If Phase 1 had been strange, Phase 2 was pure madness. Ships began attacking their own shadows. Pilots started narrating their actions like sports commentators. Someone began broadcasting a recipe for chocolate cake on military frequencies. The Devourer probe's movements became increasingly erratic as its AI tried to process the chaos. Finally, something that had never happened in the other timeline occurred. The probe shut down. "It's gone dormant," Lyria announced, staring at her instruments in amazement. "The collective intelligence has temporarily severed the connection rather than risk contamination from our data streams." Marcus felt a surge of triumph, but he knew this was only the beginning. "How long until the main force arrives?" "Based on the probe's transmission patterns before shutdown, I estimate 6 months. 6 months to prepare for the real war." But now Marcus had something he'd never had in the other timeline, proof that their tactics worked, and time to refine them. Over the following weeks, word of the Kepler incident spread throughout the galaxy. The mysterious shutdown of an unknown probe through unconventional tactics caught the attention of military strategists across dozens of worlds. Marcus found himself in the unusual position of being asked to teach alien species how to be more human. "The key," he explained to a gathering of military commanders from across the galaxy, "is not to abandon logic entirely. It's to embrace the beauty of controlled chaos. Make decisions based on intuition, emotion, hope. Trust your instincts even when they don't make sense." A Zentari admiral raised a question. "But how does one train for such illogical behavior?" Marcus grinned. I'm glad you asked. Dr. Kim, would you please explain the human chaos training protocol? Dr. Kim stood up, her eyes bright with enthusiasm. It's simple, really. We teach you to think like jazz musicians, to fight like improvisational actors, to plan like abstract artists. We help you find the creative chaos that exists in every intelligent species. As the training program expanded across the galaxy, Marcus realized something wonderful was happening. The various species weren't just learning to fight like humans, they were learning to see the universe through human eyes. They were discovering their own capacity for beautiful, illogical, gloriously unpredictable behavior. When the main Devourer force finally arrived, they faced something unprecedented in their millions of years of existence, an entire galaxy that had learned to think like humans. The war lasted 3 days. On the first day, the Devourers tried to adapt to the chaos as they always had. On the second day, their collective intelligence began experiencing cascading failures as it was overwhelmed by contradictory data. On the third day, facing the choice between contamination and retreat, the ancient machines chose to withdraw to the void between galaxies. Standing on the bridge of the flagship, as the last Devourer ship disappeared into hyperspace, Marcus felt Lyria's hand slip into his. "In all the timelines I have witnessed," she said softly, "this is the most beautiful victory." Marcus squeezed her hand, looking out at the stars that were now safe, because a galaxy had learned to be gloriously, chaotically, impossibly human. "What happens now?" he asked. Lyria smiled, her violet eyes reflecting the starlight. "Now, we teach the rest of the universe what it means to be beautifully unpredictable." And in the years that followed, as humanity led a galactic renaissance of creative chaos, Marcus Chen would remember this moment as the day the universe learned that sometimes the best way to solve an impossible problem is to stop trying to make sense and start trying to make art. The Devourers had been defeated not by superior firepower or advanced technology, but by the one thing they could never understand or replicate: the magnificent, illogical, absolutely human refusal to accept that some battles cannot be won. In the end, humanity's greatest strength wasn't their adaptability or their courage or their determination. It was their beautiful, chaotic, wonderfully unpredictable humanity itself.